Good afternoon, everyone. If you're seeing this version of this presentation, it means that unfortunately I can't be with you in person. I'm actually in the field in the Chaco, hopefully seeing some of the birds and other biodiversity that I'll be talking about this afternoon. So to start with, my name is Rob Clare. I'm the Vice President of the Flyways Program for Manamat Conservation Sciences and Director of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. But I'm also a founder member and a current board member of Vida Paraguay, a Paraguayan biodiversity conservation NGO. And this afternoon, I'm going to tell you a little bit about yellow-billed cuckoos and deforestation in the Paraguayan Chaco and why that should be of concern to anyone really interested in the conservation of neotropical migratory birds. So firstly, just to introduce the Chaco. The Chaco is the largest dry forest biome in the world. It's found in the sort of center south of South America, to the west of the Andes, and to the east the Atlantic forest, and to the sort of to the north the Pantanal, world's largest wetland, and the Cerrado, and there's actually an arid diagonal across South America from the Chaco through the Cerrado into the Caatinga in northeastern Brazil, separating the Atlantic forest from the Amazon. So this is a very large dry forest region, typified by thorn scrub forests, extreme temperatures. More on that in a moment. But also, actually, towards the east, towards the Paraguay River, there are some extensive areas of flooding savanna, primarily palm savannas, essentially a transitional habitat into Pantanal type habitat. So in the Chaco, you really have this extreme from very wet, inundated savannas close to the Paraguay River to very xeric, semi-desert habitat to the west. And a bit further south into the Argentine Chaco, there's also some more sort of montane Chaco in Córdoba province. So the Chaco is found really in three countries: southernmost Bolivia, essentially all of western Paraguay, and then northern Argentina, with perhaps just a tiny little bit extending into to Brazil and that sort of transitional area with the Pantanal. As I mentioned, this is a very xeric, a very hot habitat. The map on the left shows rainfall gradient across Paraguay. And so in the western Paraguay and Chaco, rainfall can be as little as 150, 200 millimeters per year. The map on the right shows average temperatures. Now, these may seem quite reasonable temperatures in the mid 20s centigrade for actually for most of the country, but with a tendency for higher temperatures towards the north and the west, i.e., in the Chaco. However, these average temperatures can be very misleading. Most days in the Chaco, the temperature is somewhere between about 35 and 40 degrees C. And I think last year we had a high of 52 degrees C. So if you know your centigrade, you'll know that's pretty uncomfortable conditions to be in. As is typical of many dry forest habitats, there is a specialist avifauna. It includes a number of endemic species only found within the Chaco. So starting bottom right, we have the black-legged Seriema, one of two species of Seriema, the only living relatives of the terror birds. Bottom left, we have a sandy gallito, a very typical Chaco bird. heard far more than seen. These are relatives of the tapaculos. Top left is a scythe-billed wood creeper. You could think of this perhaps as a brown creeper on steroids. This is a wood creeper that is found as much on the ground as it is on trees, and will even be found digging into the mud, rather like a shorebird in some other habitats where shorebirds occur. Center is the Chaco owl, one of the largest nocturnal predators in the Chaco, and top right is the lark-like brush runner, wonderful little funarid, full of character, communal breeders, the little family groups running through the thorn scrub undergrowth. So this is just a selection of typical birds. There are also a suite of North American breeding migrants, which occur, including a lot of shorebirds in some of the saline lakes, which are scattered throughout the Chaco, and the largest of which is Laguna Mar Chiquita in Córdoba province in Argentina, right at the southern extent of the Chaco. Chaco is also incredibly important for other biodiversity. Um, it has the greatest diversity and an abundance of armadillo species, from the very largest, the giant armadillo, to the smallest species, on the top left here, the pink fairy armadillo, which is actually a fossorial armadillo, i.e. it lives primarily underground, rather like a mole. If you're familiar with peccaries, these relatives of pigs, there are three species of peccary in the wild, two of them quite widely distributed, essentially from southern Texas south to northern Argentina. But there is one species, the largest, the Chacoan peccary, which is restricted to the Chaco, was originally described from fossil remains and thought to long be extinct, and then in the early 1970s was discovered to be alive, and I'd love to say well, but at that point it was already threatened with extinction from habitat loss and hunting in particular, and that has only continued. So this is a globally endangered species with a population just in the low thousands. There are many other large mammals found in this ecoregion, including the top predator, the jaguar, the very largest jaguars in the world in terms of their size and mass, found in the Chaco, the northern Chaco, and the Pantanal. Also, other mammals very typically or usually associated with more humid, wetter environments. For instance, Brazilian or lowland tapir, which actually has a population adapted to survive in the very dry conditions of the Chaco. Perhaps surprisingly, for such a xeric environment, there are a whole suite of amphibians, unique to the environment, which spend most of the year underground in essentially in cocoons to survive the very dry conditions. And then when it rains, there is a sudden explosion of amphibious life. Every pond becomes full of multiple species, some of which, such as the one right in the middle here, Lepidobatrachus, actually a carnivorous frog, which feeds on other amphibian species. This is essentially a sort of the size of a small dinner plate, where the head, the mouth is actually pretty much the same size as the rest of the body. So really quite a fun species to find, and one which actually has, in effect, teeth, so one you have to be careful handling as well. Right, so that's just a very brief overview of some of the very unique, very specialized biodiversity that the Chaco has to offer. But what brings us here today is the yellow-billed cuckoo. So the yellow-billed cuckoo has been known from the Chaco and the Paraguayan Chaco for many years. Um, you can see a map here from eBird showing some of the recent records. Very clear pattern of seasonality with a few exceptions, a few early arrivals. Most birds arriving sort of mid November and staying through to early March. However, one of the real challenges as we try to understand patterns of distribution, abundance in Paraguay in general is the very low number of birders and the fact that large areas are relatively inaccessible, either because of the terrain or because it's largely private property. So this map from eBird, if people are familiar with eBird, you'll know that the gray squares show the the areas where there are data, where there are observations, and then the colored squares show, in this case, squares that are where there are reports of the species. So as you can see, there's a large area of the country where essentially there are no bird observations, at least not reported in eBird. So that, as I was saying, makes it very difficult to understand patterns of occurrence and to identify priority areas. Nonetheless, over the years, there have been some remarkable observations of large numbers of yellow-billed cuckoos. For instance, I think 25 years ago now, I can remember coming back from the Pantanal and literally seeing flocks of yellow-billed cuckoos, tens, if not hundreds of birds crossing the road, the dirt track ahead of the vehicle. A really quite unique experience. So unique, I've seen it a couple of times. Unfortunately, no photographic evidence, so I have to share this photo of a different cuckoo. This is the Huila cuckoo, a very common cuckoo species in Paraguay, a communal species which they roost together. So here we have a flock of Huila cuckoos, but amazingly, there are these occasional observations of large flocks, in effect flocks, large gatherings of yellow-billed cuckoos. When we start to look at modeling the distribution of the species using eBird data and information on habitat preferences, perhaps we start to understand why some of those large flocks occur and actually start to appreciate just how important the Chaco is for the species. So in this map here, you can see the modeled breeding range. That's the red color in North America, the migration range, the sort of yellow color throughout the Caribbean, Central America, North and South America, and then the primary non-breeding wintering areas, i.e. the areas where the species is relatively resident during its non-breeding season. And in addition to some areas primarily in Colombia, you can see that it's primarily in the Chaco and the Pantanal, this area here that I'm indicating now with the arrow. And then when we zoom in on this, we really start to appreciate, again, this is based on the model data, just how important the Chaco in Paraguay is for the species. So starting up at the top left and sort of working right, and then skipping over to the bottom left and working right, we can see in yellow, in effect, cuckoos coming into the northern Chaco, spreading sort of throughout the Chaco by the middle of December. But then come early January, cuckoos are really starting to concentrate in on the Paraguayan Chaco. And then come February, they're starting to expand back out. But at least for for say about a month during the core of the non-breeding season, yellow-billed cuckoos appear to be really concentrated into the Paraguayan Chaco. One of the reasons why that is a significant concern in terms of the future of the species is that unfortunately the Paraguayan Chaco, and in fact the Chaco in general, is starting to go very fast. Deforestation rates are now amongst the highest in the world. And on these two maps, we're looking at the original extent of forest or forest type habitats in the Chaco. Remember, a lot of this is sort of thorn scrub, particularly to the west, and then to the east, to the right, it's more open sort of palm savannas. And so we're looking at this is the Bolivian Chaco up in the top. This is the Paraguayan Chaco here. And this is the Argentine Chaco. And the yellow areas show deforestation. So the map on the left is from the mid 1980s. You can see that there was already pretty extensive deforestation in the Argentine Chaco. The Paraguayan Chaco primarily limited to the central Chaco. This is an area of Mennonite colonies that have been there since at least initially, since the 1930s. Moving forward to the early 2020s, and we can see that deforestation is much more extensive, essentially throughout the Paraguayan Chaco, much more extensive in the Argentine Chaco, and deforestation really just starting to pick up in the Bolivian Chaco as well. Fortunately, most of the Bolivian Chaco is included in national parks or within indigenous reserves. That unfortunately is not the case across the Paraguayan and Argentine Chaco. Focusing in on the Paraguayan Chaco, and we can really see how deforestation has picked up over the past 20 years or so. So the map on the left, again, the green showing forest cover, the yellow showing deforestation. And back in 2000, the deforestation or the cleared areas primarily restricted to the central Chaco, where the Mennonite colonies are found. But jump forward 20 years, and deforestation is really much more extensive throughout the dry Chaco. Now, I think hopefully this will work, and you can actually see that process from 2011. I think this goes through to 2022. Sorry, to 2020. So literally the forest disappearing in front of our eyes. And what is really left at the end of the day are just a few protected areas. So we have Defensores del Chaco National Park up here in the sort of center of the northern Chaco, Médanos del Chaco National Park here. This is actually a large sand dune system. So this is the most arid area just there, also within the national park. Another national park in here, in Teniente Enciso. And that's really it. Those are the protected areas with the exception of a new area just up here, Chovareca, which is actually more a Cerrado type habitat, and Rio Negro here in the Pantanal, with the exception of a few private reserves. Extrapolating out from this rate of deforestation, that is literally what we're going to be left with is just those few protected areas. What's driving that? So in this map, we can see the deforestation process in Paraguay over the past well, since 1985, so the past 40 years or so. In the first 20 years of that period, deforestation was sort of evenly split between eastern Paraguay and western Paraguay. More in the east, but still a significant amount in the west, in that area of the central Chaco. But in the last 20 years, the deforestation has essentially all switched to western Paraguay, to the Chaco. There is a zero deforestation law in effect in eastern Paraguay. So that is undoubtedly one of the major factors there. But also, as you can see from the map, there's actually very little forest left in eastern Paraguay to deforest. The few patches you can see are the few protected areas. Apologies for that. The few protected areas, just conserving the last few remnant forests. In effect, we're looking at the future of the Chaco here as well. When I first started working in Paraguay, the situation in eastern Paraguay was essentially as it is in the image in 1985. Now we have a very different reality, and I think we're now facing this sort of same future for the Paraguayan Chaco. What has been driving that has been a very rapid expansion of the agricultural frontier into the Chaco. So, 82% of conversion for agricultural and livestock purposes in the country in the past 20 years or so has occurred in the Chaco. Some of that is related to regional phenomena. So, for instance, ranchers moving from grassland areas in Uruguay, Argentina, buying up large ranches in the Chaco and converting them to grazing lands. Also, and perhaps more importantly, as a long-term driver, as soy has become more and more adapted to drier climates, more and more soy is being able to be planted in the Paraguayan Chaco. So this is really driving a massive expansion of deforestation of the agricultural frontier. As I mentioned, fortunately, there are some protected areas. There are some large national parks, although those are very under-resourced, understaffed. There's also an important network of private reserves, some of them owned and managed by Vida Paraguay. You can see some images from those reserves. And this is the typical sort of habitat that yellow-billed cuckoos like to use during that sort of critical time of January when they're focused in on the dry Paraguayan Chaco. Um, Most of the year, the vegetation looks very much like the left image, very dry, few trees with leaves. But during that sort of critical period, January, February, that rain occurs. It's very sporadic. But where rain does occur, the Chaco, sort of comes to life overnight. Leaves appear on all of the trees. And of course, there is an explosion of insect life. And I would imagine that that's what the cuckoos are somehow able to focus in on. So when we see these large flocks, in effect, of yellow-billed cuckoos, is because they've been able to focus in on an area where it has recently rained and there is an explosion of insect life. Unfortunately, in addition to the expansion of the agricultural frontier and the conversion of vast areas to ranching and agricultural crops, climate change also poses a very significant threat to the Chaco. The Chaco is only going to get drier and hotter. So the top two maps show how temperature is likely to change. Top left is by 2040 to 2059, and top right is looking at a 2080 to 2099 window. Temperatures in the Chaco for that first period increasing by 2.5 degrees C. By that second window, potentially by 5 degrees C. And these are average temperatures. So I would imagine we're looking at sort of, daily temperatures well into the high 40s, if not 50 degrees C plus. And then on top of that, it also becoming a lot drier. The two lower maps, so those same two time frames, and essentially the areas in brown showing a much drier climate, the areas in sort of aquamarine showing a wetter climate. So as you can see, the Chaco, and particularly the Western Chaco, becoming even more drier than it already is. So this sort of triple effect of a drier climate, of a hotter climate, and conversion of habitats really does not bode well for the Paraguayan Chaco and for all of the species which depend upon it. So really the time is right to take efforts to secure as much natural habitat as possible whilst it still remains, and ensure that we can continue to see this wonderful species and the many other migrants and resident endemic species associated with it. With that, thank you very much. I hope to be able to join you in person for questions, and maybe even to give this presentation live. It will depend on my connection whilst I'm out in the Chaco. So thank you again.